This occurred a few months ago in the spring, and it was a really odd time in between for me as a recent graduate. Too much leisure time and no actual obligations yet. When I was overwhelmed with homework, it seemed like a great idea to finish school a semester early, but when I actually got all this free time, I didn't know what to do with it. My full-time job didn't start until June, and most of my friends were still in the middle of finals or classes, so until then, I was just feeling like I was stuck between two phases of my life. It was really unsettling and made me feel like I was worthless because I'm the type of person who needs to be doing something productive, so spending days on end watching time pass was killing me. That's probably why I agreed when my mom asked me to drive down to Rehoboth Beach to check on my Uncle Rick's beach house. It would be a simple favor, and I would drive down to Rehoboth Beach to make sure nothing was leaking or damaged, and perform some minor repairs to spare Rick the expense of hiring someone. Oh, I should probably add that I'm from Pennsylvania and that Rick's house is in Delaware, so the drive isn't too bad, just a little over 2 hours. The house is large enough to accommodate my entire extended family every summer, 25 of us crammed into one location playing games and drinking too much, and that's really the only thing that makes our family unique. It's not exactly on the shore, but it's close to the beach, nestled in a quieter neighborhood with winding roads and tall beach grass. Fast forward to some random day of the week that I honestly can't even remember. I believe it was a Thursday or something, and I left in the late afternoon, which was probably a stupid idea in retrospect. The drive was pretty chill. When I got to the house everything seemed normal. I made my way inside and ran through Rick's checklist. I checked the faucets, the breakers, and walked the property. Everything looked fine. To be completely frank, it felt strange being there alone. I'd never seen that house without miscellaneous board games sprawled about and crowds of family members noisily drinking. The silence was definitely the most eerie thing about it. The place felt abandoned or something. I'm sure all of you have that one place, be it a house or a restaurant or something else, that gets really rowdy when your whole family spends time there together. Now try to picture that place empty and silent, kind of spooky, right? Anyway, it was getting late and I hate driving at night more than anything, so I texted my mom to let her know I'd just stay overnight and head back in the morning. She told me that was a good idea and reminded me to thank Uncle Rick for letting me stay there, which I did. I made myself some food, messed around on my phone for a bit, and then started washing up for the night. Usually during family gatherings I'd get jammed into one of the smaller rooms on the 3rd floor while other relatives got to claim the nicer, bigger rooms. Since I had the house to myself that evening, I thought I'd take advantage of it, but I'm not whining about the system at all. I'm simply telling you how things generally went. It wasn't difficult to decide to sleep in the 2nd floor master bedroom because it has a private bathroom, a huge walk-in closet, and an absurdly comfortable bed. I climbed in around midnight and fell asleep right away. I can't remember what time I woke up, but I was still a little sleepy, but I was certain that the sound had just come from the closet, as if something had fallen in there without making any noise. I craned my head to look at the closet. Even that small action sent my heartbeat racing. My mind was awake, but my body refused to move, like some kind of sleep paralysis. Without the paralysis I could move. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to find out if there was something in that closet. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself to go back to sleep, and I almost did, but the literal second I started drifting back into sleep I heard it. A muffled thump from inside the closet. I squinted my eyes just a smidge and tried convincing myself I'd imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. As if overcome by some invisible force I laid there in complete paralysis with no control over my body whatsoever. Not like before. This time it was real. I couldn't move even if I wanted to. Until that moment I didn't truly understand what it meant to be frozen in place. I listened in horror as the closet door slowly creaked open. Through barely open eyes I watched as a dark figure stepped into the room. It just stood there beside the bed, motionlessly watching me. Maybe 20 seconds passed, each second feeling impossibly long. Then silently it turned and left the room. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. The footsteps moved across the floor, but instead of heading downstairs like I had expected them to, they actually creaked upstairs to the 3rd floor. My stomach churned. The only staircase led up. There was no exit from there. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but I was too afraid. I couldn't overpower a grown man. I had no idea if he was armed. The only thing I could do was wait. After a few painful moments in my own head I worked up the courage to snap myself out of the paralysis. Quietly I reached for my phone and dialed 911. As soon as the dispatcher picked up I whispered as quietly as I could, telling them someone was in the house. I slipped out of bed and just as quietly turned the lock on the bedroom door. Then I waited minutes dragged painfully by until flashing red and blue lights illuminated the windows. I was actually kind of shocked at how quickly the police arrived. I ran down the stairs, threw open the front door, and nearly collapsed in relief when I saw the police. They didn't hesitate, they stormed inside, moving quickly through the house. I waited outside. It didn't take them long. According to them, the house was empty. I was in disbelief. I had heard the footsteps go up and there was nowhere to go after that, so he must have still been in the house. There was no other explanation. The police insisted he must have slipped past me, that I was too freaked out to notice. I knew that wasn't true, but what could I say? The guy had vanished. I wasn't comfortable letting the police just leave though, so I called Rick. Rick wouldn't have it, so he yelled at the police and told them to check again, saying that my life might have depended on it. They did, and I followed his instructions to follow them and watch what they were doing. The officers moved methodically, opening every closet, checking under beds, and tapping at the walls as if they were expecting something hidden behind them. They pulled back the shower curtain in every bathroom, double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, and discovered that one of the third-floor bedroom windows, the room I should have been sleeping in, was unlocked. I chose to walk outside with the second officer primarily because I felt uneasy about being stuck in the house with a stranger, while one of them waited by the door and the other went downstairs and onto the back deck. The officer shined his light around the property, but there was nothing out there. He started scanning the roof, and to my horror his beam swept across something terrifying. It was him. It was that stranger that had been in the house. He was just sitting there on the roof. He was this disgusting-looking bald man in tattered clothing who looked like he hadn't seen a shower in years. The next hour was a blur. The cops communicated with each other and they got the guy off the roof in cuffs, the police said. He was probably homeless and squatting in the house for days, maybe longer, but when they asked him how he got in, how long he'd been there, and why he was hiding in the closet, he didn't answer. He just kept that eerie vacant look, like none of it mattered to him. He was in the back of one of their police cars shortly after that, and that was that. The whole thing was so crazy that it's still hard to wrap my head around. As much as I try, I cannot figure out why that guy had been hiding in that closet of all places. Maybe he heard me enter the house and hid in the first place. He thought of. I still don't know how he got into the house. Rick doesn't either, and since it's impossible to reach the roof from the ground, I think that justification is somewhat nonsensical. Rick has consistently opposed requests from the rest of my extended family to increase home security for reasons I cannot explain, even though I believe that the night may have turned out quite differently if I had been sleeping in my designated bedroom. Music. To say that my friend Mike's beach house on Jersey Shore is a stunning property would be an understatement. I obviously don't know the history very well, but from what I do know, the house has been in Mike's family for generations. His grandparents had been trying to use it as their permanent residence for a long time, but they recently passed away, leaving no one living there anymore. The house is mostly dormant because Mike's parents are too busy and most of his extended family lives on the West Coast to make good use of it. It's magnificent, or at least that's how it feels to me as someone who has never come from much. The bright side of an otherwise depressing situation is that Mike is essentially free to use the house whenever he wants. I'm fairly certain that Mike's dad wanted to rent it out to try and earn some extra money, but as far as I know, the wheels aren't exactly turning on that one. I had nothing on my plate, so it wasn't difficult to find someone willing to rent out a beach house during the off-season, so you can't really blame the guy. Mike called me sometime in mid-July, and he didn't have to coax me. I had nothing to do, and the idea of relaxing at a beach house, especially one that was nice, was an easy yes. His plan was straightforward. We'd hang out, maybe go to the beach during the day, then head to the boardwalk at night and enjoy the shore for what it was. It wasn't some crazy party weekend or anything like that, it was just a relaxing getaway from the norm, and honestly, I was looking forward to it. Mike and I live pretty close together, so he was going to pick me up and drive me down with him that Friday. I packed a duffel, threw it in his trunk, and the two of us made the drive down. The first night was chill. We got in sometime around 6:00, dropped our stuff off in the upstairs bedrooms and settled in. The house has that cozy, slightly musty beach house smell, like a mix of salt air and old wood, not in a bad way, more like history. You could tell it's seen decades of family summers. After grabbing a quick bite from a sub shop nearby, we decided to walk the beach for a bit just to take in the evening. Mike brought a couple rods with him, so we figured we'd try our luck fishing for a while. It wasn't really about catching anything though. It Was more about being out there. At one point we stumbled across a pair of girls about our age. They were walking barefoot along the shoreline, and Mike struck up conversation right away. They were local, or at least semi-local, and it turned into one of those low-stakes, slightly flirtatious interactions that happen naturally when you're young. And on the beach at night we got their numbers, and they continued their walk while we continued fishing. There were still a good number of people around since it was peak season, but Mike knew all the quiet pockets. It was the kind of night that made you temporarily forget about reality. The following morning, we got up at around 9 o'clock and made the decision to go for a run along the boardwalk. We found a nice stretch of private beach access, hidden paths through dunes, and small areas between houses where the lights didn't reach. It was already warm outside, but there was a breeze from the ocean that made it bearable. Since Mike is an active guy and I've been trying to keep in shape, it felt good to move after a night of relaxing. Later that evening, Mike suggested that we go to a few bars in Seaside, but we were both exhausted. Although the idea seemed like fun in theory, the idea of standing in line and shouting over music didn't really fit how our bodies felt after a full day in the sun, so we ended up crashing rather early. Beeping, initially assuming it was a component of a dream, but following a brief moment or two of. As I lay there in the dark, I became aware of. Was genuine. It had a smoke-like sound. One of those piercing, high-pitched notifications that pierce your. I pushed myself out of bed, skull, and began looking around me in an attempt to locate the source of the beeping. It didn't sound like it was coming from, emanating from my bedroom or another location. On the second floor, following a period of concentration, I had the impression after a few more seconds that it truly originated from above. I yanked the bedroom without thinking about it, opened the door and headed straight for Mike's. I jolted him awake in the room using both hands, and instructed him to accompany me right away. Realized the situation and rushed. After I didn't even think to place a putting on a shirt as though our lives depended on it. We both bounded up the steps, utterly uncertain of what we would be. Entering the third floor was primarily dark aside from a small amount of leaping in through the glass is moonlight. We turned the switch at the end of the hallway. Lights turned on and began looking around the room, still hoping to see or smell. There was nothing, but there was something blazing. No flashing lights, no smoke, and no signs. Actually, it was not a fire at all. Eventually, after some excruciating, vexing minutes spent looking for I discovered the source of that terrible noise. Something stashed away in one of the bedrooms. Tucked up behind a pillow was a tiny black gadget. Prior to inviting Mike into the space, I decided to have a quick look at it myself. Mostly due to sheer bewilderment, it was the size of a black walkie-talkie with, aside from a red light that blinks on. That was it, with no buttons or stickers on top. Only a sleek jet black chassis without a screen. One switch and that blinking light on the side, or at least how it appeared. I turned off a switch, and the beeping stopped as soon as Mike walked in the room simultaneously. His eyes flickered between the bed, me, and the gadget. Neither of us spoke while in my grasp. We initially looked at each other, and I could see he was equally perplexed and equally as terrified as I was. There was silence for a few more seconds before he inquired as to whether I had ever seen that black thing before. I declined and questioned him about the similar, to which he declined the following hour. We attempted to determine what it got there because of that thing, and what caused it, but no response. Mike was satisfied with what we came up with. Vowed that none of his relatives had spent a long time at that house, and I mean, why would he lie if you believed him regarding that, and who in hell would put you might find that item in their own house? Believe it was for protection, or Perhaps a replacement for a malfunctioning upstairs smoke detector, but once more, none was found. Fire, thus it has not even stopped any crises, followed by the question of how it had been activated in the initial location. That was the most terrifying aspect about the entirety of what we were seated in. In the dark, Mike's room while I had a. It was a wild concept that I couldn't believe. I hadn't realized until then the switch. I took the gadget out, and flipped the switch on and off rapidly. And the shrill beeping, you guessed it, restarted and abruptly halted when I turned it off, we both froze and in a whisper, Mike said, "Oh my God." Struck us both simultaneously. The apparatus was operated by hand. There was another person in the house that we didn't. Mike wasted no time in calling the cops, while I barred the door with a latch. We waited as best we could for what felt like eternity, and at last the police chauffeur arrived. We hurried away downstairs to catch them after providing them with a brief overview of what was happening. They conducted a thorough sweep while we waited outside the house by the front door as directed by them. When they eventually returned downstairs, what they revealed to us was terrible. Apparently, each and every window on even the third floor was exposed. Windows in the bathroom, and it wasn't only that. The drawers were turned over and the beds were removed from dressers and other items. The room where I had was on the floor. Discovered that the gadget appeared entirely ransacked despite the fact that it was pleasant, and when we looked up there, I thought it was neat. As if I were going crazy, and so did Mike. However, after being led upstairs by the officers, we were forced to acknowledge the fact that the cops didn't discover a lot more. Nobody is hiding any prints. 20 more minutes with no weapons or. Thus, they instructed us to ensure that all the windows were now guarded and locked. And to give another call if you need anything else occurred, and they simply departed. I didn't feel secure with Mike in that home after someone, probably intoxicated or insane, they had messed up with us in that manner, in such a inexplicable manner as well, but we had no. We made the decision to go to sleep. Spend the remainder of the night there and go. It was early in the morning, and we. Fortunately, whoever was in the. Nothing suggests that the house must have left. Other things occurred there during the night. Are still aspects of this evening that I am unable to describe, and I can only speculate as to what Mike must have feelings for everyone we know. Might have been in the house that evening. Never departed. This occurred quite some time ago. Enough years had gone by when I was 22. To the extent that I feel comfortable speaking regarding it, I had just graduated from college with minimal costs and an attractive employment. As I was residing in my childhood residence. Imagine that you're racking up with my parents' significant savings without needing to worry about a place to sleep or food, and while maintaining complete access to the. I grew up in my automobile, with all of my comforts of home. It's reasonable to say that I was. Believe me, I knew that you were living in complete joy. I was really fortunate to have parents who permitted me to remain at home and pay no rent. I am aware that many people lack that opportunity, therefore I never took it. Taken for granted, but not all things were as less stressed than you may imagine. I'm going to inform you that not even one month into my return home, I've never been the type of person my age wants to. Since I don't drink, label me a party girl. Heavy alcohol consumption, I don't spend all of my leisure time at clubs, and I most certainly don't let guys in To make decisions about my life that are the way I was brought up. My father is my life's most significant man and hookup. I find culture repulsive because of all of that. I wake up to a rather normal life. Go to work and feed my caffeine addiction. Read a little of my book in the gym. Home, fiddle with my phone, and head to sleep. Weekends are spent on mini roads for trekking. Travels, board games, and other things. I determine what I want to do with my time, but my best friend had a weird weekend. Lindsay invited me from college, and our Thea and Sabrina, two more buddies, spend a few days at the beach with her family. I had never been to the house, but from the way Lindsay discussed the location, seemed to be a dream hidden somewhere from the tourist-related chaos alone. Secluded beach and within a short stroll from, to put it plainly, Lindsay's water. I believe both her and her family are loaded. I had a neurosurgeon for a parent. It would be crazy to feel her beach house. And I wasn't at all let down when I first saw it. I was shocked. I know a modern architect, but I'm not one. Lindsay's and a style house when I see one. Must have been extremely contemporary, as it resembled a secret military safe more house as opposed to my own, which I would want to. I promised to show you guys images of it. I have a lot, however, out of consideration for I believe Lindsay's family would be in extremely bad taste, despite what I'm going to tell you that the four of us unloaded our belongings and made the decision where, of course, we would be sleeping. Lindsay had enough separate bedrooms for everyone of us to live in, but what would the enjoyable in that rather than the four of us remained in the same space as one of the children's 2 sets of bunk beds in the bedrooms and a separate bathroom adjoining. We'd been spending 3 nights there, which in my opinion, now is the ideal moment to spend time together with someone other than your family. I'm usually quite agitated, therefore anyone who isn't tidy or I find that being nice usually irritates me. Without much difficulty, none of my pals are. I know I told you, but you know how it is regarding my comparatively dull way of living already. But if there was a chance to have some alcohol, I was with my buddies that weekend, so I undoubtedly intended to release just a bit more than I usually would. Wished to maintain the first night's beauty. Calm, though, so we strolled to the private beach that is attached to the residence and watched the 4 of them while sitting in the beach. White Claws were being consumed by us, listening to Sabrina's house music speaker after we were aware of something in the it was this slight flashing at a distance. Light coming from a distance. The 4 of us fell silent as we went along the shore. Down a little and observed the flickering light. The sight was kind of on and off. Hypnotic, as unsettling as it was following as the light became apparent to be swinging like a portable device. Someone was walking with a flashlight, and soon after, we understood that's precisely what it appeared to be. 3 or 4 people strolling leisurely toward us. Not moving, stumbling, or running. Oddly, but walking at a slow pace. As they approached, we began listening to the laughing that made us all feel a little more at ease. Given the late hour, it was the most. Maybe only a few teenagers, or even we must have caught the attention of persons our age. Because one of them yelled at one point, saying, "Hi," in a cordial tone. It was the voice of the man, and he sounded near our age. Thea retaliated, and we created some idle chatter as they traveled over to us when they got close, so we could observe that there were 3 men in the group who appeared perhaps 1 or 2 years older. Compared to us, they all possessed that usual beach boy appearance, which I could tell. My pals were digging away, especially Thea is quite insane when it comes to. I can't say that I was overly surprised, gentlemen. She is aware of my feelings over her way of life. Therefore, it's not as if I'm speaking. To be fair, she's dropped dead and insane. Stunning, and I've never seen a man who. The boys sat down after taking a liking to her. With the 7 of us and their beers. Kept drinking. In reality, it was a fantastic time. The guys weren't not overtly flirting, but they dull or skip ahead an hour, and after a few drinks, they finally asked us to return to their home. For my part, I was worn out and was inclined to go to sleep, but I could let my 3 buddies know. Wished to stay in touch with the males, particularly Thea. I naturally made the decision to avoid ruining everyone's enjoyment. I called. I'm spending the evening alone with my buddies. In order to continue without me, there were just 3 men in the end, and I had no desire to link up with anyone who. At night, I made my way back to Lindsay's home as the 6 of them strolled by the shore, probably in the direction of. While the guys were there, I cleaned up and went to sleep. After 3 in the morning, I received a FaceTime call from Lindsay when I woke up. Which was perplexing because she ought to have either fallen asleep or arrived home by then. I responded to her next to one of the guys in a dazed tone, and her words awakened. She practically screamed as soon as she saw me. Into the phone that Sabrina and Thea owned. Been abducted, and I had to rescue her. Automobile right away, and what she said was like a bucket of freezing water splashing. Never in my life have I felt a more high levels of adrenaline and terror. Without wasting any time, my hands were actually trembling as I hurriedly put on a few garments and ran down the. I asked her why she had called me on the stairs rather than the police, and she gave assurance. She instructed me to use what she already had. Remain on the line while she guided me through it. With her guidance, I successfully opened the driveway gate. Her car keys and leave quickly in a. She informed me that they were in a matter of minutes. Around 10 residences along the shore to the left, so I began driving there. She explained the vehicle to me and explained what. I slammed into the direction it had gone, trying to catch up there by putting the gas on. There was not a single vehicle on the road, so I was traveling at a ridiculously dangerous speed. I was lucky not to get pulled. After driving for a few minutes, I saw a vehicle that matched Lindsay's description of a slow-moving vehicle in the distance, after which I hung up the phone. The police and provided them with the precise location. The operator instructed me to keep my distance to avoid warning them of the circumstance, thus I took that action after. For what seemed like an eternity, I saw a cop illuminates the automobile in front of me. I didn't attempt to avoid the police. Think that they believed it to be an irrelevant halt. I stopped the vehicle and watched everything happen. It was unadulterated turmoil. The police took everything away by force. At gunpoint, 3 men from the SUV placed them in handcuffs and led them back to a cruiser, followed by one of the cops approached the vehicle's trunk vehicle and opened it to show both Sabrina and Thea were bound, and from the. It appears to be quite severely injured as terrible as the entire event was. It was insignificant in comparison to the sequence of incidents described from their point of view. The 3 of them felt at ease with. By the way, I'm writing this since we're still close contact, thus I naturally inquired. But none of them expressed a desire to write it themselves, and with good cause, to maintain. Briefly, when I went to sleep, Lindsay's continuous drinking is the only person with a clear memory. Because she was making an effort to be at least a little accountable because it was her. Our accommodations were in a family's home. At one moment, the men Sabrina and Thea. We recommended that they all go to bed. Therefore, the four of them parted ways while Lindsay informed the third man that she was leaving. He was very disturbed about that at home. Which Lindsay first believed to be. As he desired to have a relationship with her, she would have been down, he informed him. Had to keep an eye on her home, and he became irate. For a while, they shouted at one another and in the end, he instructed Lindsay to leave his residence immediately and don't return back, something she was more than delighted to do. However, she discovered halfway home that she returned because she had forgotten her purse. She saw the males at that point sending Sabrina and Thea to the rear of the vehicle before leaving. She made a call. I was followed by the cops, and that was all. Both of Thea's parents practice law, and they go through a lot of obstacles to accomplish too. The event is kept as far away from the public domain as much as possible and create. Those individuals definitely received the maximum sentence. Phrases. They completed both, and it turns out that the residence where they were lodging didn't even belong to them, but someone else owned it. An unidentified elderly couple on vacation in another nation that, in addition to the numerous more offenses for which they were charged, will store them for a long time. Even while I continue to believe there isn't sentence that is sufficiently lengthy to make up as much as they could for what they did. This traumatized me, and I hate to admit it. I was unable to visit beaches late for years. Evenings or conversing with strangers regardless how innocuous they appeared or how secure I felt like I turned antisocial and briefly strayed away from the females. Fortunately, though, that has subsequently changed, so I can't. Not to mention how this incident, a part of me that was impacted by Thea and Sabrina, seems as though forgetting anything is Fortunately, I believe the most absurd aspect of the entire situation is the reality that if I hadn't returned home, possibly not able to get to Lindsay's vehicle in time, but if it hadn't been because the police might not have ever discovered the automobile of those guys,